How actually does an Animal Crossing Edition Switch Lite end up looking like this? The truth is, in this case, I have no idea. We bought this online, it was really dirty, and that's why we bought it. Getting this in hand, and I am super not confident that pretty much anything is going to be working in here. It is in really bad shape. Let's take the shell off and see on the inside what we're going to be dealing with here. I can't even get to the threads on this screw, so let's brush a little bit of that gunk out of the way. There we go. We do want to be careful with these screws on the outside of this Switch Lite. They are pretty easy to strip. And I'm noticing here that we are missing a screw right there. And we have a crack in the shell. Let's get our pry tool underneath here and start to release the back of this. We get our first look on the inside here, and definitely some things that are messed up, but also not as bad as it could have been. We have a couple loose pieces of glass that are not part of the system. So if I had to hazard a guess as to how this Switch got in this condition, right now I think the leading theory would be that it was maybe in a car accident. And if that is the case, I do hope that whoever was in that accident is okay. See, right here on these buttons is some dirt that just looks like it's really compacted on there, suggesting to me that it entered this dirt with no small degree of force. I want to note this longer screw. I want to make sure to trip any of these gates before we pull these cables out, and we also want to disconnect this battery now as soon as possible. I am using a hairdryer here just for the heat to loosen the adhesive on this spongy bit that's on top of our heatsink, hopefully to be able to kind of scoot this back with my spudger here in order to remove it without tearing it, as I have done on pretty much every other Switch I've worked on. 3 quick screws, and then we can use our spudger again to pop this up out of the way. There we go.
There we go.
Quick look at our heatsink here, and we'll need to clean it like everything else in here. Let's take out our game card reader and auxiliary port here. They're both connected together. Let's make sure to trip that gate and get this cable out of here carefully. Both of these Z buttons look pretty bad, so we're gonna get this off and take a closer look. The housing that they sit in actually looks pretty good. The buttons themselves are really worn though. And similar to the right-hand side, the housing looks pretty good, and the button is obviously going to be pretty well worn underneath that road rash. And with that fan out of the way, we're at the place now where we can trip all of these gates and remove these cables and hopefully get our motherboard out of the way and take a good look at it. I always want to make sure I'm only carefully, gently wiggling back and forth and only grabbing the top of these plugs to remove them from where they're plugged in. I just wanted to peek inside of the speaker housing and make sure it was all clean inside, and it looks like it is. Let's move on to the left-hand side here and disconnect everything. This cable is lightly adhered to the bottom of the battery housing here. A little bit of heat could have helped us. Same process as with the motherboard. Let's just trip these gates, remove the cables gently, get this speaker out of the way. And these buttons and silicone pads here are really, really gross. A lot of dirt got jammed into here. So let's set this all aside, remove the joystick here. There's this funny little plastic ring that's supposed to remain stuck onto the shell itself that came off. We'll have to put that back on. See, that one, at least on one of the points, remained stuck on here. And we get a good look at that joystick. These buttons aren't in near as bad a shape, but they're still dirty. I've spent quite a bit of time trying to decide how I want to show you this part of the procedure. So this is only the second battery I've ever taken out of a Nintendo Switch, and I am following the instructions that were given to me by my mentor and boss, Steve from Tronics Fix, who gave me this syringe bottle with IPA and told me to kind of keep putting IPA in here, letting it soak into the very overly sticky adhesive pad on the backside of this battery, and then working it up with a pick here. I also consult ifixit.com when I do these teardowns for their advice, and they advise using a much more minimal amount of IPA. Just a few drops at a time in order to not risk putting too much IPA in there, which apparently could damage the screen underneath. I find that to be really impractical though when trying to take this battery out, because that much IPA just isn't going to cut it. I'm trying all kinds of other methods here to get this battery out. Obviously you can see me using my hair dryer here for heat, which I don't think is going to end up helping that much because I'd have to get the heat underneath the battery itself. I also am trying Goo Gone, which does end up helping, though it's also quite a bit of liquid that we're putting inside of here, and it's probably not the best idea if we want to protect the screen underneath. Eventually, I find a solution that does work to help me get this battery out, at least on this switch, because the housing that holds this battery was broken on the bottom, and I could get my spudger underneath here and come at it from the bottom side. So we have sort of a success. However, I would definitely not recommend you ever do yours this way. Number one, because your housing isn't going to be broken. Number two, because I also probably broke the screen putting pressure and plying underneath here with this spudger. If you happen to be following along for advice on how to take one of these out, please stay tuned, because I found a method that does work way better than anything that I have tried here, and I'll be sharing that with you here in a little bit. For now, back to the disassembly, and we did get this battery out, although you can see this pad still stubbornly holding on. Just a little piece of tape here in the way. I wanted to make sure it wasn't hiding a screw, and it wasn't. So we can take this housing unit off here. Just didn't want to tear that cable. We got it. Now we can actually remove the screen and all of these pieces here. So I'm going to use heat and my little guitar pick thing here from my iFixit toolkit to slide under here carefully and remove the actual screen here that's underneath our digitizer. Now this is already heated up, and I can just carefully push on the outside edge of the digitizer screen protector outside part here, and we can work it loose. I also could use that guitar pick to slide under here and keep using the heat, which I probably would do if I were coming at this from the other angle and wanted to keep this adhesive, but I'm going to end up replacing it. This gross strip here is just going to be thrown away, and we'll use our own double-sided adhesive on the inside there. Looking at this battery, I have a theory that the reason it was so difficult to remove from the top is because the adhesive pad on here was set not quite on center, but really aggressively towards the top of this battery, making it difficult to gain purchase and have a place to start prying. To begin our surface clean on these plastic parts here, I'm going to use very warm water with Dawn dish detergent, as well as a paintbrush, which helps me kind of clean a larger surface area than my toothbrush. I also, along with my paintbrush and toothbrush, like to use makeup brushes, but for this particular project, they lack the requisite oomph to scrub this dirt out of here. No amount of cleaning, though, is going to completely restore this shell, and I'm okay with that. I'm actually kind of looking forward to seeing what this looks like put back together, even though it has been cleaned, with some scars on it. This particular Animal Crossing unit is going to have a story behind it. And if I can get it working again and it shows some of that wear, some of the what it's been through, it has some history to it. To me, that actually has value beyond just making something look brand new again. Before we dump out this water and rinse these parts off, I should check to make sure we're not missing anything. And it looks like, I think, we got everything out of here. So let's move on. A dry cotton swab will help me remove this old thermal paste, which we will replace when we put it back together. I'm using a 99% solution of isopropyl alcohol here, and interestingly enough, this is the reason I wear gloves. It's not because of the dirt or the grossness. I can wash my hands. It's actually because this IPA will seriously dry out your skin if you get it on there while working. I'm going to use a brush with some longer, stiffer bristles on it to help push some of the grossness out of this thing. And then BW100. This is a contact cleaner that is safe to use on electronics. And what I like about it is it has this jet spray nozzle that I can kind of use to blast inside of here and loosen up some of this dirt that's been compacted inside. Another one of my favorite gadgets here is this electric air duster that I can use to blow some air inside of here and remove the dust from the fan. And I think that's done a good job. Makeup brush with IPA to try to clean off whatever is on this board here, and I'm not feeling very hopeful about it because I'm getting some flaking here from the board, and it's not because of any chemical or water damage or anything. I think it's from the board actually kind of being compacted when it was in whatever caused it to get in this shape. This is hard to show on film, but this port here is really compacted with grime and dirt and stuff inside of there. I'm going to do my best to clean it out, but even using this spray isn't helping me enough. So I'm going to carefully use a dental pick and try to remove some of this. And you'll see what I'm talking about as I slowly start to dig this stuff out of here. I'm being as careful as I can. I do realize that I am putting this at risk by digging around in here. If we end up having to replace this port, we will end up having to replace this port. But we're going to test and see, because I would love with all of this stuff to just be able to fix it as much as possible with cleaning. Let's rinse this out a little bit now. And I'm still seeing some stuff in there, so we're going to keep working at it a little bit and hopefully get all of this out of here by the time we're done. Let's move on to some of the other parts here, like this micro SD card reader. Get my stiff bristles in there as well to help loosen some stuff up. I'm going to go ahead and clean this screen, even though I know I'm not going to be able to use it because it is broke. But normally I would just put this IPA very gently, carefully around the edges here, and then using a gentle microfiber cloth, just kind of clean wipe, make sure there's no fingerprints or any more debris or anything on this screen. Now that it's cleaned up, let's take a look here. Sorry for the blinding light, but it's the only thing that I found would actually get these cracks to show up. You can see breaks in plenty of places underneath here. To be honest, I'm not sure if these are from the accident or if I caused them. I would lean towards thinking that I was the reason that the screen broke, which doesn't make me feel great, but it does make me feel good that I learned something, which is a better method for removing the batteries when I need to do this again in the future without putting the screen at risk. Man, I would love to keep this digitizer, but it's just too scratched up. Same thing with these joysticks. Even if I got them working on the inside, which I will go ahead and clean them to take a look at them, they're just too beat up for my taste. So yeah, we're going to get replacements for those. Coming back to this motherboard, I'm noticing a few places where there's still some gunk or corrosion or something on here, so we're just going to give it a second clean. We looked at this button under a microscope and it looks a little squishy and just kind of weird. It's moving around there. It is possible to replace those buttons, but it's beyond my soldering skill level, so I'm just going to harvest one out of this switch light that I found on Steve's desk. Beyond that, we ordered a couple of replacement parts. If I can just get them out of this packaging eventually. We have a couple replacement joysticks, as well as a new screen and digitizer that will match on this teal colored Animal Crossing Switch Lite. Makes me so nervous trying to cut this, getting it out of here, making sure that I'm not accidentally cutting one of the ribbon cables inside of here. But being very careful, I think we are getting it okay. If you ever order one of these though, caution. Be very gentle. There we go. Let's take a look. That crease on there is just from some protective film that's on top. We have harvested our board here, and now I want to show you something else. There's a few screws here that I've already removed that can just simply take this entire housing unit out of here. It does require a further disassembly on the Switch than you technically have to do if you're just replacing this battery, but why not? If I'm ever doing this in the future, I'm just completely removing this entire piece in order to work at it without having to worry about being anywhere near the screen. And I know I already ordered these replacement joysticks, but why not just use these actual white capped ones outside of this Switch Lite? I think that's what I'm going to do, and I'll just save those for later. Moving back to our shell here, we have a few little bits of cleaning that need to be done that were missed by the soapy water, and we have a break. I will fully admit that I caused this while cleaning. It was holding on by just a thread, but now it completely does come apart there. While there are a number of ways we could go about this, I am just going to use Loctite brand super glue here and my dental pick to carefully spread this glue where we want it and hold these pieces exactly where we want them to stay. There are a number of different plastic bonding substances that you can use as well. I have used them in the past and I just kind of get overwhelmed by the smell, and I don't work in a super well ventilated area, so I'm choosing just to use this super glue, but be aware there are other, perhaps better methods, and you may want to take those into account. Just going to hold this here for about 5 minutes, adjust my grip, and let's move on. Before I put my double-sided sticky tape strip down here to put the screen on, I just want to remove every bit of remaining adhesive from in here. We have two different widths of this double-sided tape that we can put on the inside rim here. And just want to make sure to have it all covered so that we have a complete bonded surface to be able to attach our screen to. Making sure to get our cables underneath on the outside, the back side of this screen here. And we should now be able to press this all securely into place. I don't know if it's necessary to include this piece of paper, but I have it and it's clean, so I'm going to put it back. I am going to swap out this battery and battery housing part out of the yellow switch that I pulled a few other parts from, just because it's ready to go. I'm also going to pull this thin plastic ring out of here because I noticed that the other one was torn. Just heating it up a little bit to get those sticky tabs off, and we'll put it in here and it should be able to re-adhere itself right to this shell. And I think now is about the time when we can give you a nice reassembly montage. I'm sorry to have to break the flow so soon, but I have to do a little bit of a reassembly in order to fix a cable that became pinched when I put it in, and make sure that I have enough of it sticking out to be able to plug in. There we go. Let's get everything back together and pick up with our reassembly. There are some marks on this cable that didn't clean away, so I'm just going to swap it for a different one just in case that's something going on the inside that's going to cause it to malfunction. The connector on this cable also looks a little bit worn and it didn't clean away, so we're going to swap it out as well. Hey, you made it with me through to the end of the video. Congratulations! This project is done, this switch is working, and I'm pretty happy about it. But I also have some mixed feelings. On one hand, I feel like this project wasn't really a complete restoration. There's obviously still a bunch of cosmetic damage on here, as well as the posts that these screws go in that didn't really work out perfectly. So I'm not gonna get full credit in the restoration community. But I'm also not gonna get full credit in the fixing community because I didn't really fix anything. Everything in here that didn't work, I just replaced because I'm fortunate enough to work somewhere where we had donor consoles that I could harvest parts out of. We ended up replacing the screen, the digitizer, both of these thumbsticks, the battery and the housing that the battery sits inside of, plus a couple of ribbon cables on the inside. But on the other hand, I'm really happy with this. I love that the case still tells the story of what this Switch has been through. I love that even with that damage, you can still play games perfectly on this. So I feel good about it, and I feel like even though I know I'm gonna get some flack for it, this particular project fits really well within the philosophy of what Restore-ish is all about. That even if you're still growing and make mistakes, even if you don't do things the way that they're supposed to be done all the time, you can still bring good quality life to old broken stuff, using whatever you happen to have available and growing your skill in time. So if you like that, if you like Restore-ish and you want to watch more, YouTube will recommend a video. You just click right down here in the corner and you can keep hanging out with me. We'll see you next time.